I was 16 years old. I can't recall the specific month, but I know it happened sometime during the summer. My parents were away for the weekend, leaving me with 2 days to myself. I mostly spent my time upstairs in my room, wearing headphones and rotating between watching YouTube videos, playing video games, and grabbing snacks from the kitchen. Being a teenager, it felt nice to just hang out in my room undisturbed, doing whatever I wanted. While I was playing a game, though, I began to hear voices. Initially, I assumed a video had started playing in the background, but when I checked YouTube, everything was paused. So I took my headphones off and realized the voices were coming from outside. My bedroom window was slightly ajar, allowing me to hear a muffled sound of someone speaking. It was raining outside too, which made it harder to hear. Whoever it was had to be close, near the outside walls of the house. I couldn't make out what they were saying or if they were talking to someone else. It sounded like just one voice. By the time I got up from my chair and walked over to the window to listen more closely, they had stopped talking. I decided to go downstairs and check the other windows to see if they were still around, as it was pretty odd for someone to be that close to the house at 8 p.m. It seemed like whoever it was had already left, though because I couldn't see any sign of them when I reached the bottom of the stairs. I took the opportunity to grab a bag of chips from the kitchen, then headed back up to my room. I must have spent about an hour gaming up there, and the time flew by. I was in the middle of a round when I suddenly heard a voice outside my headset. Even with the headphones on, the voice was much clearer than what I'd heard earlier. Not necessarily louder, but far less muffled, and I was certain I recognized what he said. I quickly removed my headset and listened. The house was quiet, with only the occasional creak as I waited. About 15 seconds later, I heard the voice again. "Luke?" The man called my nickname. My full name is Lucas, but I went by Luke with my friends, and that's what he was calling. I didn't recognize his voice though, and more importantly, I was almost certain his voice was coming from below me, like inside the house downstairs. I quietly placed my headset on the desk, got up, and walked to my bedroom door. I carefully opened it, trying not to let it creak or make any noise. Just as I opened it, he called my name again. Though yelled isn't quite the right word. He was calling it out, but almost softly, like when you call someone's name just to ask them something. It was very calm and friendly. In the context of someone breaking into my home, this only made the situation more disturbing. His voice had a grating quality to it, sounding like he might be in his mid-50s, perhaps a heavy smoker. As he said my name again, I confirmed he was definitely inside the house, likely right around the bottom of the staircase. I backed up, leaving the door open, too scared to close it and make noise with him so close. Then I went to the back window, opened it further, carefully stepped out onto the roof, and closed it as much as I could without latching it shut. It wasn't a full roof, just the overhang to the front porch, creating a sloped ledge, maybe 3 or 4 feet wide, where I could stand or sit. It was definitely not the safest place, especially wet and slippery from the rain. But I didn't have many choices unless I wanted to hide in the bedroom and likely be found before the police arrived. That's when I realized I was screwed. I'd left my phone on my desk. I was too focused on getting out to even think about it. I moved back toward the window, preparing to go back inside and get my phone. But just as I peered into the room, I saw a shadow moving down the hall outside my room, coming through the doorway. I quickly moved back out of sight. My heart was pounding. A few seconds later, I heard things shuffling around in my room, followed by the man calling my name again. "Luke?" That creepy, soft tone. I peeked over just slightly to see part of the room. All I saw was his shadow moving on the wall, looking at my desk, likely realizing I had to be nearby. I really wanted to look more to see who he was, but I couldn't risk getting caught. I started getting that gut feeling, that sixth sense, that I was about to be discovered. So I acted fast, moving to the farthest point of the ledge. Below me was just a small bush and some grass. It was maybe an 8 to 10 foot drop. I sort of dangled first, then let go, hitting my legs on the ground and falling back. It was painful, but I didn't break anything. I got up and ran to the nearest neighbor. Honestly, I don't know how people in these stories I listen to manage it, because in my case, I couldn't get anyone to answer the door and help me. I mean, it was the middle of the night, and they probably thought I was some lunatic trying to get them to open the door. It still worked out though, because one of the houses called the police on me for banging on their door, which gave me the chance to explain my situation to the officer who arrived. I had no idea how long I was out there. My guess is about 20 minutes before the cop came by. The man in my home was gone, but the officer also found the window in my room fully open. The guy had checked out the ledge at some point after I left. It made my heart sink knowing how close he had been. In the following days, my legs swelled up from the jump, but ultimately, I had no lasting injuries. It's crazy to think that decision might have actually saved my life, or stopped whatever sick plans that intruder had in mind. I think it will always linger in the back of my mind though, knowing I was so close to seeing who the man was, and yet I didn't. I kind of wish I had risked it and looked, but it's easy for me to say now while I'm not actively in a life-threatening situation. As far as me and my family know, the guy never came back and never followed up on anything. I'm much older now, so I don't think anything will ever come from it. And hopefully it stays that way. Story 2 by BG. I work as security for a small office space in town. Even after this occurred, I chose to keep the job because I couldn't find anything else with better pay. Trust me, I'll leave as soon as I can find something better though. One reason I took the job and didn't mind it initially was that the office space was part of a large business district, or office park, located in a fairly wealthy part of town. Honestly, I couldn't see why anyone would actually try breaking into one of these places, figuring they'd know a wealthier area like this would have security, whether in person or through cameras and monitoring systems. Anyway, I clocked in at 10 p.m. and did my first quick rounds to activate all the detection systems, then headed into the security office. It was more like a closet, really. No windows or anything, so it wasn't a fun place to be. If I could help it, I preferred to walk around quite often. I was only supposed to get up and walk around every hour, including a perimeter walk of the building. But I did it more frequently because just watching the cameras and systems was really a drag. However, this night, it was pouring so hard that walking around outside was too difficult. So I was stuck inside walking the hallways. One thing worth mentioning is that the cameras always fogged up every time it rained, making all the outdoor ones nearly useless. About 30 minutes into my shift, an alert appeared on the monitor, indicating motion detected by one of the cameras on the front of the building. I checked it and could barely see anything, though it seemed like there might have been someone standing outside the front door. I could just make out a little bit of movement, so I left the office and went down to the first floor. All I intended to do was go out there and see what the person wanted, or if there was even anyone there, because honestly, someone walking that close to the house at 8 p.m. was pretty weird. It seemed like whoever it was already gone though, because I couldn't see any sign of them when I got downstairs. I reset the alarm and closed the door. It was very strange for anyone to be out here tonight. Maybe they had the wrong building. Regardless, it looked like they had left, so I tried not to dwell on it. I went back up to the office. I had only been sitting down for another 5 minutes or so when I heard a phone ringing. It wasn't the security phone on my desk. It sounded like it was coming from a floor below, in one of the offices. Annoyed, I got up and walked down there, but by then the call had already gone through. I waited a few minutes, and almost as if I'd predicted it, they called again. I followed the sound into what looked like a typical office room, with desks lined up in rows. The main overhead lights were off, but right in the middle there was a small glowing light from a phone on one of the desks. I walked up to it. It showed unknown caller. I found it extremely odd that a random phone on one of the office desks was ringing. Why this specific one and not the reception desk phone that was linked to the company? How did anyone even have the specific office phone number and extension? I felt tempted to answer and ask who was calling. The mystery of it was hard to ignore, but it wasn't my business to be answering random phone calls. I could probably have gotten in trouble for it if someone found out, so I left it. I didn't know how to put the phone on silent, so for the next hour, I constantly heard the thing ringing downstairs as I sat upstairs in the security room. At 1 a.m., I got up and did a quick walkthrough of the office, just the usual rounds. It only took 10 minutes, and then I was back at the security desk. But I hadn't even sat down when I heard a thump resonate through the building. It echoed as if it came from the hollow stairwell or possibly a hallway. It scared the hell out of me. I checked the system but saw nothing interesting. So I ran back down to the first floor to recheck the doors I had just checked. I felt a shock as I approached the front door and noticed a blinking green light on the alarm system. It had been put on pause, essentially disarming this specific door. Even I never did that. I only turned it fully on or off, never on pause. Feeling tense, I pushed open the door and looked outside. It was still pouring and still nobody out there. I closed and relocked the door. Something really strange was going on this night, and it was the first time since getting this job that I'd actually felt uneasy. I had no idea what was going on. I started to hurry back up the stairwell, hoping that if I looked over the system again, it would give me some sort of answers. I got to the third story when I stopped right on the stairs. The door leading to the third floor office hallway was open. That was also where the phone had been ringing from earlier. I carefully stepped up to it, not hearing anything as I approached, and looked out into the hallway. And then everything went black. My sight, hearing, probably my whole consciousness just cut out for a split second. When I came to, I was completely disoriented and stumbling backward. Even though I blacked out for a moment, I knew instantly that I'd been hit in the back of the head. As my body fought to stay awake, I fell down a few steps in the stairwell and saw the blurry outline of someone standing in the doorway. I immediately forced myself to my feet and stumbled down the rest of the steps, my ears ringing and head throbbing. As soon as I got outside, I used the work phone on my belt to quickly dial 911. I hid behind my car in the downpour as I waited for them to arrive. I was so out of it, I couldn't tell you how long I waited. They didn't find anyone in the building. I was taken to the hospital and treated for a pretty bad concussion, but was otherwise okay. While it might seem like just a regular break-in, a lot of things added up to make it feel more professional. I guess they chose a rainy night when the camera lenses were fogged over, and assuming it was them calling, they knew a specific office worker's phone number that wasn't publicly available. And most convincing is they knew how that exact security system worked and how to disengage it so they could get in unnoticed. It seems too coincidental to be some random person breaking in on a whim. The guy hit me so hard too. I couldn't even make out anything but a blurry image of him. So I had no description to give the police. All this being said, I know I won't be getting any answers. I've still been working there months after this happened, and the company hasn't told me anything. Nothing about if anything was stolen or if they knew who it was, or even what he broke in for. Nothing at all. It's really odd, and I'm still in the process of looking for a new job. But until then, I'm going to be way more aware of any strange things going on at this office. Story 3, by Anonymous. A few months ago, my buddy Thomas and I were hanging out at my place for the evening. Neither of us had to work the next day, so we were just relaxing and having some beers. Honestly, we weren't planning to stay out that late, but by 10 p.m. I offered Thomas the couch if he wanted to stay, which was actually pretty common. He still lived with his parents, so hanging at my place was his way of getting some space. We made plans for the next morning too, and the whole thing turned into planning a pretty cool day. But since Thomas hadn't brought any extra clothes or anything, and before he'd had too much to drink, he quickly drove back to his place to grab some stuff. That way, he could drink more when he got back and have clothes for the next day. Obviously, he could have stayed home since he was going back anyway, but like I said, he preferred hanging at my place. The drive was only 5 minutes, so I just stayed behind and waited. I was going to hang out on the porch, but I hadn't realized the massive storm happening outside. So I went back inside and waited on the couch. I was scrolling on my phone and sipping my beer, not really paying attention to the time. But at some point, maybe 15 or 20 minutes later, a knock finally came at the front door. I quickly got up and casually opened it for him, but nearly dropped my glass when I was startled to find it wasn't Thomas. It was just some guy dressed almost entirely in black and dripping wet. I swear the man looked so creepy. There was no way in hell, even if I were drunk, that I would have ever opened the door for him. Normally, I would have checked first too if I hadn't been expecting Thomas. And with the crazy storm outside, I had no idea what this guy was even doing there. Before I could say anything, The man put one foot in the doorway and looked inside at me. He looked like he'd been out in the rain for hours, though he had a tired expression covering his whole face. I reached back for the door and apologized, saying I'd mistaken him for someone else. He kept his foot in the doorway though and just smiled. I started to close the door, and he still didn't get the hint, keeping his foot right there. It was incredibly weird and awkward because for a good 4 or 5 seconds we just stood there. He didn't say anything, and I was too drunk to think of anything to say. Then he finally moved his foot and took a step back, still smiling as I closed the door. Immediately I went back to the couch and texted Thomas about the creepy guy lurking outside the door. Honestly, it was more of a joke text. After getting the door closed, I thought the whole situation was so ridiculous that it was kind of funny. Maybe I'd had a few too many drinks. I waited a decent amount of time, definitely longer than it should have taken him to be back. I figured maybe the storm was making things take longer, but when I went to the window and looked out to check on the storm, I saw Thomas's car was back, parked on the curb. Confused, I went to the front door and opened it, but Thomas wasn't there. I stood in the doorway looking out into the rain for a minute, but it was clear Thomas wasn't around. His car was parked and turned off, and I didn't see any movement inside, so he definitely wasn't still sitting in there. I pulled my phone out and called his cell. Right away, a light lit up in his car. It was definitely his phone, and it lit up enough for me to see clearly that he wasn't inside. Now I was worried. I walked out into the rain to the bottom of the driveway and looked around. I called out his name, but it was so loud outside, I knew it was useless. Somehow, it wasn't until I got completely soaked by the rain that I remembered the creepy man who had been outside the house earlier. I started to think he might have had something to do with this. Getting a really strong, overwhelming feeling about the whole thing, I ran back inside, closing and locking the door behind me. As I took my shoes off, I quickly felt that something else was wrong. I looked up and the main hallway was dark. Like really dark, as if none of the lights were on back there. I was sure I'd left them all on, or at least a couple of lights. I slowly walked down to the end of the hallway. The storm raging outside the walls, mixed with the calm quietness inside the house, made it way more tense than I was comfortable with. I got to the end and looked around. All the rooms were dark, but right along the side of the wall, the faintest outline of someone was standing there, pressed up to the wall as if trying to stay out of sight. I must have looked at them for a little too long, though, because after a couple of seconds, the man moved confidently and stepped toward me. He was holding one of his arms up and had something in his hand, and at time, I didn't look long enough to see what it was before I ran. I used every muscle in my body to run as fast as possible out the front door and as far away as I could. I hid in some random house's front porch and called the police. From there, I could sort of see through the rain to the front of my house. So a few minutes later, when the cops showed up, I watched as 2 officers calmly walked up to the front door before suddenly raising their guns and sprinting inside. I guess they saw the guy still in the hallway and chased him out the back door, but they said he jumped the fence and they lost him in the storm. I ran over and told them everything, and they immediately started searching for Thomas. Thankfully, they found him after only 5 minutes. He was locked inside a car parked down the road, tied up. It turned out the man creeping outside my house held Thomas at gunpoint as soon as he pulled up. Then, after forcing him into the car down the road, he came back to the house and broke in through the back while I was looking for Thomas, presumably trying to do the same thing to me. Which means when I saw him holding his arm up, he was holding a gun pointed right at me. Had it not been too dark, and had I seen what it was, I probably wouldn't have even risked running away, which would have left both me and Thomas at the mercy of this insane man. Anyway, the car the guy was using was stolen earlier that night, so it was a dead end, and the guy was completely lost to the storm. No traces whatsoever. We have no clue what he intended or why he did any of it.